All right, 49ers. Well, I'm not going to say they just won. The game's technically not over, but we're live, which means game's essentially over. There are some NFC West games that we're going to keep our eye on and talk through those. But the 49ers win. Big victory, an expected victory. We're going to talk about it all next. All right, welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. Down to the last second.
That one wasn't
It's
as
your boy
good.
Jesse. It's not Tuesday, but we've got Suneil. Suneil cannot join me on Tuesday, so we went ahead and rearranged some things. We got him here for the post game. Suneil, my guy, how you doing in that floral sweatshirt of yours?
Doing fantastic, man. Glad to get a victory, right? 49ers are going to be, seems like, looking like maybe first place all by themselves because, you know, the NFC West seems like it's going to take all L's other than the 49ers. But it is a bittersweet because obviously, you know, a lot of big names went down. So a lot to talk about.
Yeah, definitely is a lot to talk about. Lions Mania says, how did you know the 49ers would dominate? They are dominating. That was the thumbnail, is dominant. Fred Warner picture. Because, come on, the 49ers versus the Panthers. I was shocked that the Panthers even scored a touchdown. I'm not going to lie. So, yes, I knew it was going to be dominant. And then Oleg, not Tuktarov from the UFC, but Tokarov says, and he's yelling it, the Niners played the worst team in the league with the worst QB. You may not be lying on that one. It is crazy. Yes, bittersweet. We're going to talk all about it. Let's hop in, though. I don't know if you remember back in the day, Suneil, but they used to have, we didn't have the internet and all those things that we could check scores. We had to wait for paper headlines the next day.
Right.
Old school newspaper headlines. And it was usually like a 3 or 4 word headline that would come out, and that would give you like the overarching thought of the game, and then you would go and read about it with the box score and everything. So with that being said, you don't necessarily have to do a headline, although I've got one that I think is pretty good. That being said, you don't have to give that. However, just tell me the story of the game or give me a headline, both, whatever you want to do.
So on the spot freestyle headline: 49ers lose in win.
Ooh, I like it. Okay. Talk us through this one.
So obviously, you know, one of the bigger takeaways is going to be knowing what ends up happening with the injuries that went down. When you see Bosa and Mosley go down in, you know, one game, that is extremely concerning just because, you know, there's already 2 starters along that defensive line that aren't playing in Kinlaw and Armstead. Excuse me. Bosa was, you know, leading the league in sacks, was playing, you know, out of his mind. For him to go down, and then, you know, Mosley once again having a really great season. Him and Ward are, you know, one of the best cornerback duos in the league right now. For him to go down, you know, hopefully we hear that they're all temporary injuries and they could come back. And then, you know, something that was kind of under the radar just because we haven't seen him play all this year, Jimmy Ward goes out early in the game for another and is ruled out because of a hand injury. So that's not even the same injury he went out for or was on the IR for. So those are 3 very integral parts of the, you know, 49ers defense. Not to mention along the line, a couple other injuries. So there gets a point, Jesse, where all of these injuries, you can't keep making up the difference with backup players. And I don't know, 49ers are definitely pushing that line to see where how far they could get without having their stars in the lineup.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the injuries a little bit later because there certainly is a lot to talk about. The headline I'm going to go with is the 49ers get offensive, right? They put up 30 points today. 37 or whatever it was technically, but the offense came up with 30-ish, more like 24, whatever. It is the highest scoring offensive game they've had all season long. So I think that that is a headline. We're going to talk about whether that was them being really good or the Panthers being really bad, maybe a mix, but a lot of players really stepped up today. I thought the receivers all played really good. Yak was certainly there. Jimmy started out shaky early, but I think he did some really good things. I want to give him credit for the throw to Tevin Coleman. Now, I know that Coleman made a spectacular catch down the sideline, but one thing that has frustrated people with Jimmy Garoppolo is that he normally doesn't give his players a chance on those 50-50 balls. He did that. That's all you can ask for.
Mhm.
Coleman came down with it, worked out in his favor. So I think overall the offense looked good. And that was really despite a Kittle fumble, which kind of sucks because I think it's his birthday today. So they tried to feed him early, started out great, and then it didn't go so well once he fumbled. But overall, I thought the offense continuously moved the ball. And I don't think the Panthers have that bad of a defense. They certainly had some players that were out,
They're
but
ranked 15th.
been pretty good overall. So for them to score as many points as they did and move the ball as much as they did, I thought it was pretty impressive. So for me, that was my newspaper headline going into tomorrow.
Yeah, and sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah, the Panthers are middle of the pack. Their defense was ranked 15th going into this game.
Yeah, so not horrible at all. So okay.
Yeah, and I think when you mentioned the offense, one big kudos needs to go to this rushing attack, and especially the interior offensive line, because more than I've seen maybe throughout the season, the 49ers ran right behind the center guard option in the middle, and we're getting great success. I think the combination of Wilson and Coleman is going to be what we see from this point on. All of us Jordan Mason fans, including me, got to give up on that dream of Jordan Mason getting some more touches, because Coleman played great today. Obviously, we know Shanahan loves Coleman, so I think we're going to see a Wilson Jr. Coleman backfield, and I'm actually kind of happy about it, because this was the most balanced rushing attack that we've seen as far as even amount of touches for running backs from throughout the whole season. Even in the beginning when Elijah Mitchell was there, Jeff Wilson wasn't having that much success. This is the first game all season where there's two running backs that both played really well, and we hadn't seen that. So I don't know if we could necessarily correlate that right away. The season will tell us. But if they could have two running backs that could perform in the same game, that probably bodes well for a offense that likes to run the ball a lot.
Yeah, and Elijah Mitchell really should be back after the bye week, from what I understand. So we've got 3 more games without Elijah. Then you got the bye week. He should be back after that, hopefully. So, yeah, I agree with you. It doesn't really matter who the second guy is. Tevin Coleman definitely turned back the clocks today. But you're right. Just splitting carries is a huge deal. We've talked about this, how Shanahan, for the last 2 years or so, has really started to favor a running back, runs them into the ground, and then it's next man up. It's an interesting thing. So I'm glad that he has a second running back that he can trust, regardless of who that is. And if that's Coleman and Coleman can look this good, I'll take it for sure. Absolutely. Dylan says, is this now Jimmy's team from now on going in the future? I don't see how the Niners just let him go and not compete for the job next season. I don't know. I think it's way too early to even care about that, to be honest, Dylan. But since you did pay, I will answer the question. I don't think anything we see from Jimmy or have seen from him thus far is anything different than what Jimmy is. So if they want Jimmy to be on this team going forward, then I would imagine that that would have been a decision that is already made, and they're going to try to work that out. I don't think we're going to see anything special from Jimmy that it's like, oh man, we just have to keep him around, that we hadn't seen prior. So to me, I don't know what that decision is. I don't think that they're looking at it going, man, Jimmy is just something we didn't expect, have to keep him. That decision will be made at the end of the season. I think a lot of it will come into how healthy is Trey, who else is out there available. There's going to be a lot of veteran quarterbacks that were starters guys like Mayfield, Wentz, now guys you may not want, but a lot of veteran quarterbacks who have been starters for a long time in this league that are going to be available as backups going into next year. So we'll see how it plays out. What are your thoughts on it, Suneil?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it looks good right now, coming off of a two game win streak, but we're only 3 weeks removed from when everybody was like, "Oh my God, this is the worst quarterback play we've ever seen in a 49er jersey," with how Jimmy played against Denver. I think Jimmy is giving the 49ers exactly what they expected. That he took a pay cut for a reason. That was because there were no other teams out there that were willing to give him the contract or the opportunity that he was looking for. And, he's going to be a starter somewhere else, or at least on another team trying for a starting job. I think they would only need to bring Jimmy back, like you said, if Trey is not going to come back healthy, because I didn't see anything that Jimmy's done that Trey can't do, other than the fact that, Trey obviously can't because he's injured right now. So I think that unless they could get Jimmy on a $6 million deal like they have him right now, I don't really see a path where the 49ers are going to bring him back for big money, because I assume that's what he's going to be looking for, at least, 10 to 15 million per year to play next season.
I agree. I think that's a good point. Let's not forget that Jimmy, it ultimately is his decision. Even if the 49ers want to bring him back, he's a free agent. They can't franchise tag him. They can't force him to do anything. It's going to be Jimmy that decides that. And if Jimmy is going to come here with no guarantee to start, if he does well this year, I don't know if that's something he necessarily wants to deal with. And are the 49ers able and willing to give him 15, 20, $25 million for next year? I see that highly unlikely. So we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. But I think it's just way too early to even worry about that. Let's just get some wins and figure it out from there, is kind of where I'm at with it. Okay. Were there any surprises from this game, in your opinion?
Yeah, we mentioned it, and it's TC. And I'm not talking about Tom Cruise. I'm talking about Tevin Coleman coming out and really putting his mark on the game early. I don't think we had a running back that could catch the ball out of the backfield the way that he has. We haven't seen it, at least this season. And he really played a big role in this game in keeping this offense on the field for certain drives, and I think he played really, really well. And I think it showed in the success of this offense, because they made Carolina look as bad as their offense looked. But this defense is actually the strength of the team. And like we said, they're middle of the pack. So to still be able to dominate the way that they did from the offensive side, especially with Debo not having a huge game. Ayuk had maybe like a decent game. You saw Jennings kind of break out a little bit, but overall, I don't think the receiver numbers were that great. It was really a product of the rushing attack being dominant. I think they averaged close to 6 yards per carry, so 5.8 yards per carry. I don't know if anything happened after we, went live as far as if they had any plays, but they were right around 5.8 yards per carry. If you're averaging, 6 yards per carry or close to 6 yards per carry for a rush first offense, you're talking about, that's exactly what Kyle Shanahan wants to see. They were able to get it.
Yeah, 100%. I would also say for me, the biggest surprise was Jalen Moore. I thought he played pretty damn good for the most part. There were a couple here or there where maybe he let someone through pretty quick, but overall, I think the strength of the Panthers, that defensive line, I kind of low key expected him to get eaten alive, especially in passing downs. He held up. He held up just fine. Got to remember, he's a third string left tackle, and left tackle is arguably, that and center are the two toughest positions along the offensive line. So for a guy who has been kind of a turnstile when he's come in and played, remember when Trent Williams went down, they put him in for a few plays, and then they immediately pulled him out
right,
and went to McKivitz. McKivitz then went down. Now they don't really have a choice. Moore is a guy that we've talked about as being more of a guard. However, he did really good this game as a tackle, I believe. So enough confidence that to where if Trent Williams is coming back in 2 weeks against the Chiefs, like I believe that he is, they can get through one more game with this level of play from Moore. So I think that that's something that's good to look forward to as well.
And Jesse, just an update. The
Let's talk about
Cardinals
a division outlook. Yeah.
The Cardinals missed a field goal to tie it, and that game went final. So the Eagles end up taking the victory, 20-17.
All right. Well, let's talk about the division because Seattle lost.
Right.
The Eagles just beat the Cardinals, so the Eagles stay undefeated. And then the Rams are down by 12. Dallas has the ball. It looks like that game is going to go final here shortly. So all three, this is very similar to week one, right? All three division foes lose, but the 49ers do what they're supposed to do and should have done in beating the Bears. And now they have won the game, giving themselves sole possession in the division. Not only that, but technically up another half game on the Rams and Seahawks because they won both of those head-to-head matchups. So, division outlook with the way things are playing out. I know that it didn't start out great. What is your confidence level in the 49ers winning the division as it sits right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty high. I think that, obviously being undefeated in the division, going, 2 up, 2 down, kind of a 2 for 2 against the Seattle and the Rams, I think that was a very, very good sign. And they beat them when they were still struggling, right? They're still up and down or whatnot. They do have another game with the Rams, in a few weeks. But as far as the Cardinals in the next matchup with Seattle, they're going to have some things figured out by that time. So they're going to probably be better than the versions that went 2-0 in the division earlier in the season. So with that being said, I think that bodes really, really well for the 49ers being able to, get the division victory. And I know you talked about it last week, I'm right there with you. The 49ers going 5-1 in this division and even 6-0 in this division is very realistic. I would actually be surprised if, they drop one. And to be honest, I think it would be to the Cardinals, if anything. But, I could see them go 6-0 in this division, but at worst 5-1, because I do think they have the Rams number. And, Seattle, even though they're playing well against every team not named the 49ers, I still think that's going to hold true as far as them not having a solution for the 49ers. But all that being said, it all depends on what this defensive line looks like and, if we get some of those big boys up front back.
Yeah, 100%. The Rams offense looks so atrocious. And I don't know how much of that has to do with the offensive line. I think McVay just hasn't been a good play caller. I think Stafford is locked in on Cooper Kupp. They cannot run the ball. And that's not an offensive line issue. They just don't run the ball well anymore.
Right.
They weren't effective with it last year. They're not effective with it now. Stafford is one of those guys that he's a true gunslinger. And if things are going well around him, he's going to make a lot of big plays. But he is going to give you chances to pick it off, and he's going to turn the ball over. Well, now those turnovers are outweighing the big plays because they really don't have a quote-unquote big play receiver. Now, there's a guy out there in Odell Beckham who may be interested in coming back. But if the Rams are, say, 3-5 when he's available to play, does he really want to sign with them, or does he go sign with Buffalo or Kansas City or just another Ravens maybe? Mm-hmm. I don't see any help coming back for the Rams. I thought they were worse going into this season. I think they are clearly not a very good team right now. The Cardinals are going to be getting Hopkins back, so I agree if the 49ers do lose one, it definitely could be to the Cardinals. The Cardinals have been in every game. Things have gotten interesting. Hopkins is a big-time addition that they are going to have for both of those games against the 49ers. That said, I feel very confident with the division. And even at 9-8, this team's probably going to win the division. The NFC West just is not very good right now. The NFC as a whole is not very good. The 49ers have a ton of injuries, and we're going to talk through all of those. But they really have a whole season to get right and get healthy entering the playoffs, because it's not going to take a lot to make the playoffs, in my opinion.
Right. I agree.
Flav says, no chance Jimmy will be here next year. Either he doesn't win a Super Bowl and fans run him out of town. I don't think we have anything to do with it. I just want to be clear about that. I think Shanahan has proven that he will do whatever he wants to do, regardless of what the thoughts of fans are. Or he does, and he's too expensive. Gotta enjoy watching Jimmy while we have him. Let's go. That's a party of one, Flav. You enjoy watching him. I'll just keep rooting for wins.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess obviously if Kyle Shanahan wants him and is willing to dole out the money to get him, but I can see the fans making this a place where Jimmy doesn't want to come back to because he doesn't feel appreciated. So maybe in that sense, he could he could like choose to go somewhere else because, like you said, ultimately it's his decision. But I think that's going to be where there are other opportunities for him, like where maybe Carolina, right? That's probably a team that's going to need a quarterback here pretty soon because it doesn't seem like Baker or Sam Darnold are the solution there. So who knows?
Yeah, and I'll say this. I mean, like I said, I feel like what we got from Jimmy Garoppolo last week was perfect, and he's kind of continued that, right? So for me, I just want to see him do this against good teams. And I am a little concerned they have teams like Kansas City coming up with these defensive injuries. At what point does Jimmy and this offense have to go win a game or win a shootout because the defense is just not able to hold up, either because they're just playing a really good offense or there are a lot of injuries? And right now, there are a lot of injuries. Let's talk through them all. They entered this game with Armstead and Kinlaw out. Sounds like they are week to week. I don't know how serious things are for either of them, but it seems to me like both of those injuries are going to be lingering injuries all season long. So you've already got that going on. Jimmy Ward came back today. He played one snap, and from what I'm hearing, I don't know if it's true, but he broke his hand first snap of the game. And I do know he was holding his hand on the sideline, and he was immediately ruled out. Okay. You've got that injury. Mosley, the knee injury, looked horrific at the end of that game. He was able to get up under his own power. We don't know how serious that injury is. So
And
there
Bosa.
are Aziz Al-Shair injured. So just defensively, there's a
Bosa too.
lot of concern. Who?
Bosa had that groin injury.
Bosa
So
pulled his groin or whatever.
whenever you talk about a groin injury, you know that those are week to week. Those are lingering issues. That's actually what put Ward on the IR, right? Was a groin injury. So, or was it a hamstring? I forget.
Hamstring. But
hamstring.
Kittle missed the first 2 games due to a groin injury.
Right.
Yep.
So the groin injuries are really tough, especially for a guy like Bosa that's very explosive, needs to be able to, have quick movement and explode. That puts a lot of stress on the groin. So I would expect him not to be back next game either. So
yeah, I wouldn't expect him next game as well. So let's talk through all of these injuries for a second. So how concerned are you? And we can go injury by injury as well after I get that and figure out how they maneuver and replace these guys. So just level of 1 to 10, how concerned are you about these injuries?
Yeah, I would be like a 7 to 8. And the reason for that is against offenses that are ranked 31st, you probably could get away with it, right? Where the backups can play well and things like that. But before, the injuries were like not at every single level, right? So you had the injury to Jimmy Ward, but still the defensive line and the corners were intact, right? Then the defensive line got injured, but the safeties were playing well, but the cornerbacks are still intact. Now we have very impactful injuries on multiple levels, if not every single level of the defense, right? Defensive line, 75% of your starters are week to week and probably going to miss some time. Linebacking core, 33% of your starters are going to be gone for a meaningful period of time. Now with cornerbacks, that was a strength. Now all of a sudden it's just Mosley's going to be probably missing a game or two, who knows, depending on the injury. And then obviously we have the injuries in the safety. So when you're talking about just that many injuries on multiple levels of the defense, even if you're as elite and have as much depth as the 49ers do, is going to catch up to you. So to act like this defense could maintain its number one status when you have all pros or people playing at a very, very high level, missing games and consistently or like significant time. Yeah, that's really worrisome. So I'm worried about their ability to keep going. Now, as far as worried about if this is going to impact the 49ers' ability to make the playoffs, the one you mentioned it, having the tiebreaker against the Rams already being up 2-0 in the division may make that margin of error a lot bigger. And because the rest of the NFC West isn't playing as well right now as either, I might not be as worried that they're not going to make the playoffs, but I'm not just trying to make the playoffs with this team. I want them to be competitive. I want them to have a deep run. So that's where I put it at like a 7 or an 8.
Yeah, it's interesting because offensively, we know where they are at with those injuries. We know Trent Williams should be back soon. We know when roughly Mitchell will be back. And right now, as it sits right now, I'm at a 10 because I don't know the severity of the injuries.
Right.
Once I know what's going on tomorrow, then I'll be able to assess maybe Bosa's week to week. Maybe Mosley goes on IR and is back for sure in 4 weeks. And then I don't feel as worried about it. But as it sits right now, I mean, Mosley, for all I know, could have a torn ACL and is able to get up and walk. That doesn't mean that he doesn't have a serious knee injury. It looked really bad. Bosa may need groin. I don't know. I don't know the severity. So right now I'm at a 10, but like I said, that could easily scale back. But as far as how they address these, they have really good options. Okay.
Right.
So for Mosley, you have two options. One, thank goodness you've got Verrett healthy and ready to go. And you've got a rookie in Womack who was an outside corner. He started out in the nickel, but he has the athletic profile to play outside. Young, long, fast. I mean, everything that you need to be a good corner, plus a good defense around him. So that helps things out. So I think they're actually better off at corner than they are defensive line at this point. But even then, not so bad. You've got guys like Hyder and Givens and Jackson and Aminahu. They can just throw waves at you with this defensive line still, even with the injuries. And maybe with some of these injuries, they go out and they sign a guy or two. Yes, you're missing that main guy in Bosa, but it doesn't mean they can't generate pass rush. But I will say this, as it stands right now, if you look at the original depth chart of this team, they are missing 6 of 11 starters all the way through. That is significant. And the defense has been really good. They were able to piece it together to finish this game strong. We'll see how that continues to go. And maybe against the Falcons, it's not the most concerning, but against the Chiefs, it sure is concerning. Yeah. Against the Rams in that second game, it may become concerning if that offensive line gets healthy for the Rams. So we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. But I do think they have really good depth. That is one thing that is playing in their favor, especially in the secondary. But man, it's rough. It's a lot of injuries to overcome.
Yeah, so I'm not I'm Mr. Optimistic and Mr. Positivity, but I think that defensive line depth is a little bit overstated right now because we're putting that in the, I guess, in the context of what we've seen so far.
Right.
We've seen the offense be able to sustain drives and be able to score points and things like that against two teams. Well, the Rams, I think, are a better team, but Carolina, even though their defense is okay, still it's not a surprise that the 49ers could put up points. If this offense goes stagnant, that defensive line depth isn't there, Jesse, because the depth is the guys that are going to be starting. And now we're asking guys that come in spot duty to now have to take more snaps. And instead of being on the field to give the superstars their breather, now they're having to be the impact players that a Bosa, Armstead, Kinlaw, these guys are able to do. So if it goes back to the type of games where the defense on the field for a long amount of times, I don't think that the depth is there because now these guys are not getting the breaks that they used to be getting because they're the guys that usually give the breaks. So it is going to be a little bit concerning. But the silver lining is, if these injuries are temporary for these guys, this is the part of the season where you want to get these guys as much experience as possible, so that later on in the season and in the playoffs, they've seen some meaningful playing time. There's stuff on film for them to work on in game time, real game time experience versus just practice field experience, because that's probably going to help in a deep playoff run.
Absolutely. Dylan says, ain't nobody enjoy watching Jimmy. There's a few. There's some people that like watching Jimmy. Edgardo says, Coleman played good, but where's Mason? Listen, Shanahan doesn't trust rookies. If he has a choice to not play rookies, he's going to choose not to play a rookie. If he's choosing between rookies, then that's one thing. But right now, Shanahan has proven rookies are not his cup of tea for whatever reason. KW2421 says, no way Shanahan lets Jimmy go if he wins the Super Bowl. This team is too good to let a rookie take it over. They just have to make sure to figure out the contract. Trey's not a rookie. Trey will be in his third year. Now,
Jesse,
I know he'll be a first-time starter, but what's up?
I'm sorry. We have to do this breaking news, and it's not good.
Mosley.
49ers Emmanuel Mosley has suffered a torn ACL, according to Kyle Shanahan.
I knew it.
So
I knew it.
That most likely means out for the season.
Yeah.
So he was also asked if Jason Verrett is ready to jump in and start. He said, we have to see how practices go these next few days. So, tough loss with Emmanuel Mosley, especially how well he's playing. You gotta feel for the kid, because he's in a contract year, right? So, this was his chance to show what he's capable of, to get a big contract with another team or with the 49ers as well. Tough loss for the kid. Tough loss for the 49ers. But yeah, like you said, there is some depth there, and now we got to see, next man up.
Good job by the moderators in the chat catching that spam artist. That was good. Good on you. I blocked him, so thank you for putting him in timeout. But yeah, I mean, first of all, if the Niners win the Super Bowl, I don't really care what they do, but we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. But Trey's going into year 3, so not quite a rookie anymore. Dylan says Shanahan said they are worried about the ACL for E-Man. Yep.
Okay.
Ward broke his hand. Knew it. Bosa, tight groin. Pause. Robbie Gold. We didn't even talk about Robbie. Knee contusion. They may need a kicker next week. I'm sorry, but have you ever seen a kicker get injured as much as Robbie Gold?
Yeah, he looked extremely old on that tackle. He didn't even wrap the guy up. He just shoulder bumped him, and I don't know what he was doing on his knee at that time. So
yeah, it's very.
I mean, we need to talk about the special teams too. I don't know if that's a topic, but that's something I mentioned to you that I felt like was a going under the radar as far as how bad they've actually been in certain aspects of the special teams, and I think it showed a little bit more this game, even though they were able to get a win out of it.
Yeah, let's actually talk about it in a second, but let's stick with these injuries. So Mosley is done for the year, torn ACL, which is
well. Somebody mentioned that it was just they're worried about it, so I don't know if it's official. I read that it is that he has suffered it, but I don't know. Maybe it's still up in the air.
Usually, if you think the night of that it was torn, then it's most likely torn, because there are tests that are going to show you just right away what's going on with it. Sounds like he did not pass those initial tests, which means, unfortunately, it's probably a torn ACL. So silver lining for, I guess, the 49ers is that they are working on a contract with E-Man. Most likely they'll be able to get him for cheaper. But for the person side of things, Mosley's going to miss out on a lot of money because of this. And then what does the team do this year? Luckily, Verrett is coming back just on time. Now, Shanahan said we'll have to see in practice. That just tells me him and Womack are competing for the starting position. That's all that tells me. And Womack, I think, can start. I really do think so. I think Womack is a good athletic corner. As I stated earlier, And if it's him or Verrett out there, I know they are not Mosley. It sucks too because Mosley just got that pick 6 today. I know they are not Mosley, but I think they can really hold it down. I really do. I'm not as worried about losing Mosley as I would be a Bosa or anything like that. And Bosa, I gotta imagine they're probably going to keep him out against Atlanta and then hope that he's ready to go in 2 weeks. You don't want to risk any tightness in the groin. It's just not worth it. It's not.
Right.
So I imagine that he's going to miss a week as well. Let's talk about.
And I mean, for cornerbacks, I don't know if Ambry Thomas is injured or what's there, but he's there as far as depth. He had moments last season.
In case of emergency, break glass. We don't.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if we.
And then hopefully a guy like Dante Johnson. I don't know where he's at right now, but he probably gets brought back on the team as far as depth as well, because he's played well in spot duty. So I think cornerback it isn't as dire as last season when Jason Verrett went down, because obviously Mooney Ward is there as the lockdown, and Verrett possibly could be there as healthy, but still a tough loss because Emmanuel Mosley was balling. So
to say the least.
Yeah.
Also, I'll say good news. Ward having a broken hand may not be the best now, but he'll be back before season's end. I mean, I imagine he's back for the final 5-6 weeks to make a stretch run with this team. So that is good news. Maybe he plays with the club for all we know. We'll see how it goes. But I was told that Ward broke his hand immediately after the injury. Shout out to my guy, Marco. He's always on top of it. But, now getting the confirmation, we know what it is. It's probably a 4 to 6 week thing. So we'll see how it goes. Okay. Special teams, not team. There's an S. It's plural, Suneil. Talk to us about special teams. What are you seeing with them?
So I mentioned last week that, the question you asked was, did the 49ers put the league on notice? And I said that this team still has some weaknesses that they've been able to get away with. And one of it has been special teams. Now, we know that this offseason, there was a concerted effort to make the special teams better because of where their weaknesses had been and how it had been like a weakness in previous years. And obviously they brought in some guys, and for the most part, the special teams had been, okay, at least in covering punts and kickoffs. But Jesse, when I went further into the numbers, the special teams numbers haven't gotten that much better, other than punt returns and kick returns. Like there were a couple yards better there than they were last season, but that might have changed because of the 2 kick returns that went for big yards against Carolina. So there's a very big possibility that after this game, the 49ers special teams is worse than it was last year. We've already had 2 punt blocks. We've seen missed field goals. Starting field position is actually worse than it was last season. Ray McLeod has shown that his ball security isn't the best, and we haven't seen the explosive, returns from him that we've expected. And in games, these last few games where it's shown, like, luckily there's been more blowouts, and there hasn't been close games where we needed the special teams to actually make an impact. But not all of these games are going to be blowouts. The defense isn't always going to get a pick 6 to separate the league. And like I said, I put a tweet up, Jesse, and I said, this team would be really, really bad with this offense and special teams if we didn't have the number 1 ranked defense right now. If that defense wasn't doing what they're doing with the pick 6s, with the 3 and outs, with the stifling the opposing team's offense and holding them to as many points as they've been able to hold, with how stagnant this offense is, with how poor the special team has played, this could easily be a team that's 1-3 or 1-3, 1-4. So that's something to be aware, because like we said, this defense is getting, with all these injuries, who knows if they're going to be able to sustain the level of play for a long amount of time if these guys are out for, multiple games. So I think that the special teams is a big question mark, something that has caused us to lose games in the past. And I don't think is being talked enough about as far as that they're not playing well and that this could lead to an issue moving forward, especially when we have Super Bowl aspirations.
Yeah, and I'll say this, special teams is probably going to continue to take a step back from a talent standpoint. Where do you get the talent and special teams players? Well, they're backup defensive players and offensive players. If your defense is depleted, all of a sudden everybody moves up a rung. And so you're bringing in guys that are third string to now play special teams. That means your special teams is taking a hit from a talent standpoint. So you're right. Special teams was supposed to be the strength. That's where they spent a lot of money in the offseason, and it hasn't necessarily been that. I don't know that it's horrible, but it's not a difference maker. And that was kind of the hope going into the season, is that defense would be a difference maker. Special teams would be a defensive or difference maker. And the offense can hold serve. They can win a ton of games. But if the special teams is not going to be a difference maker, well, now all of a sudden you've got one unit and that unit's depleted. You're right. It's something that we have to monitor 100%. I think that's a great point by you.
And I don't know what your definition of not horrible is, because if your special team has 2 blocked field goals, a missed field goal, been muffing punts left and right, there was another muffed kickoff return, right? Luckily, he was in the end zone and he was able to just down it or whatever. But Ray McLeod once again mishandled the ball on a kickoff return. So I don't know. I'm a lot more concerned with the special teams than I think most are, because I've seen in close games how this special team has affected the 49ers from being able to win. And that's one thing, like, none of these wins have been close, Jesse. Last season, I think it was 6 out of 8 of the losses that the 49ers had throughout the season were one-possession games, one-score games. So the 49ers have shown a history of not being able or struggling in very close games. And one of the reasons is the things that move the needle in your favor when it comes to close games are things like special teams, are things like consistency on offense, having a superstar quarterback. Well, what of those things do the 49ers have? Not very much, right? Other than an outstanding defense, the things that usually help teams win close games, the 49ers don't have. So that's one thing where we're extremely reliant on the defense playing number one. If this defense starts playing as the 7th or 8th ranked defense, Jesse, I don't think we're winning as many games as people might think.
No, that's a good point. But maybe the offense can get things together pretty quickly too, because like we said, Mitchell will be coming back, Trent Williams will be coming back. We're just gonna have to see how this whole thing plays out. Dylan says E-Man comes back on a JV deal to prove himself. Maybe he does a 1-year deal. I still think the 49ers are willing to give him like a 3-year deal, pay him pretty decently, not as much as they would have before the injury for sure. We'll see. We'll see if he takes a 1-year prove it deal and tries to bet on himself, or if he just takes the security of a maybe 4-year deal that can be voided after 3 type of situation. But definitely wishing the best for E-Man. Hell of a player, hell of a story, and hopefully he can come back stronger next year for sure. But hate to see it. We were actually going to go live 5 minutes earlier, but then that injury happened. It was like, okay, as a fan, we got to gather ourselves before we go live, because seeing that was not something that was fun to watch.
We both shared the same 4-letter expletive at the same time as well, which was pretty funny.
Yeah, we certainly did. We certainly did. All right. Well, I think the last thing that we can talk about, and I don't have it as a topic, but you threw it out there, and it's something that we've brought up multiple times throughout our shows together this year. Is what we saw today more of a trend of what we're going to see going forward, or is this a blip on the radar? So early on it was they're losing to bad teams. Is that a trend or is that a blip? And you've talked a lot about the offense and how they haven't put together a complete game or 2 good halves in a long time. Now they were able to do that today, but how much of that has to do with the Panthers, or Is the offense starting to put it together? If you look at how they parlayed from last game into this game, do you feel like this team is starting to really put things together, or do you think this is more of a blip on the radar and we're going to have a lot of ups and downs this season?
Yeah, it's funny to me because it's funny that it may be more irony that this happened against the Carolina Panthers, because this team is very similar to the Carolina Panthers in the sense that without like the explosive defense. I think that the 49ers would look very similar to the Carolina Panthers if they had a middle of the pack defense, because of how inconsistent this offense is. Because a middle of the pack defense now has more strain on themselves because the offense can never bail them out. And that's what really happened in this game is the offense was so inept because of how bad their offense is, and also a combination of how good our defense is. And then the stress goes on the defense where eventually they're just going to get gassed out and going to be gashed for big plays, right? Think about the type of plays that were the most explosive for the 49ers. Most of them were blown tackles, right, Jesse? And usually blown tackles are a sign of what? Fatigue, whether it be mental or physical. And that, I think, is more what played into this offense being as good as they were, versus whether or not this is going to be consistently the way that they look game after game. Because I still don't have faith in this offense till we see it. There's we're always looking for numbers and factors of what can kind of indicate where where we could see 49er victories. And I did some research over the last 2 years, Jesse, when the 49ers have been able to score at least 14 points in the first half. Their record is 9-1.
Interesting. Okay.
Right? And what is something that I always mention to you? If the 49ers have scored at least 14, and this was before I did the research, I was just like, my feelings over facts. If the 49ers score at least 2 touchdowns in the first half, they're going to win the game. Like, that's been kind of my mantra throughout. And then I went back and I looked, they've only lost one time when that's ever happened in the last 2 years. So it's important if this offense can score at least 2 touchdowns in the first half, or in this game, they got the touchdown from the defense as well. But if this defense is playing with the lead going into the second half, a substantial lead, the chances of the 49ers winning are immense. Now, can the 49ers offense be good enough to stay consistent in the first half of games? We haven't seen that yet, Jesse. So until we see it consistently, and I would need to see it maybe like four games in a row before we could say, all right, now it's that way. Then maybe things could change. But it has been 2 games, so props to them for doing it 2 games in a row. But we need 2 more games, and then I'll be more confident. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. But really, to me, it's been a game. We saw them start out good last week, whatever. But this is the first complete game offensively they've had all season. They only put up 17 points last week. It's not like they put up a ton of points offensively. Mm-hmm. This is the first week they've really put it all together. Now, the Panthers have a decent defense, but they're without a starting linebacker, both their starting safeties, and in the fourth quarter, they lost their best cover corner. So they were pretty depleted on defense, much like when the 49ers lost Bosa. All of a sudden, the Panthers started moving the ball pretty good. Interesting how that works out. So we'll see how this plays out. I do think they can figure it out. I'm not in panic mode by any sense of the imagination. However, we talked about the injuries. We talked about the defense and how we expect them to take maybe a backslide, especially as they start playing some of these high-powered offenses. The offense has to step up. This 17 points scoring in a game is not going to cut it. They're going to have to put together some games where they get 3 touchdowns and a field goal. They're going to have to do a little bit more on a consistent basis. And sometimes it's not even necessarily that they're playing a good defense, but they're going to have to continually score just because they may be in a shootout. And our defense, with injuries or what have you, cannot make the stops that we're used to them seeing. So we're going to see how this whole thing plays out. But overall, it feels great. to get a freaking win. It absolutely feels great. I'm happy that we're talking about a win for the second week in a row. And that's all that we can hope for. It's a week-to-week game. Next week, I think, is going to be a little bit tougher than what people think. The Falcons are playing teams extremely close. They are not getting out of any of these games. They almost really should have came back and beat Tampa, but we're going to talk about that through the week. I know that you're gone for the week. It sounds like do you leave Tuesday, Suneil?
Yeah, I'm leaving Tuesday. And just to mention why people should look at this Atlanta game as a trap game, the 49ers have played 2 mobile quarterbacks this season. How has that record gone? 0-2.
It's backwards. It's mirrored in the
0-2, right? So
yep.
The 49ers Achilles heel is still a mobile quarterback, and Marcus Mariota is more known for his legs than his arm. So definitely, and without Bosa there to keep one edge going, and Mosley who really helps out as far as his tackling ability, with him going to be gone as well, it's going to be a tough night out for the 49ers. So definitely a trap game. I don't think they should go in overconfident. This is one of those games that, the 49ers could easily lose if, the offense is sputtering and they force the defense to just make play after play after play.
Yeah, and 100%, I want to say this as well. Mike brings up a great point. We've played 5 lifeless teams and come out of it 3-2. The 49ers have not beaten a team with a winning record yet. Not a single one. So, in fact, they've lost to 2 teams with losing records. So, right. The 49ers haven't looked great by any means. What's up, Black Cat Panther Podcast? He and I did our podcast on Wednesday where he broke down the Panther side of things. Sorry, man. Baker Mayfield's buns. Matt Rule is atrocious. I feel for you guys over in Pantherland, but you might get your future quarterback in this draft. But I appreciate you, Dub Q, for coming on Wednesday. That was a great show. People loved you, and we will have to do it in the future. Suneil, thank you so much for joining me for the post game. Everybody that tapped in, I will be back at the latest on Tuesday, not with Suneil because he'll be out of town. Appreciate y'all. Have a blessed night and enjoy the Sunday night game. Peace.